You hear it all the time in the world of painkillers, right? Two names that almost always seem to pop up together, Tapentadol and Tramadol. And there's this idea floating around that Tapentadol is just a glorified Tramadol. You know, the newer, fancier, more expensive version of basically the same old bang. But is that actually true? Today, we're going to put that claim right under the microscope. So let's just get right to it. Is Tapentadol just a dressed-up version of Tramadol? To figure that out, we've really got to look past the brand names and dig into what the science actually says. So think of this as a bit of a myth-busting session for your medicine cabinet. All right, first, a little backstory. Tramadol? It's been on the scene since 1995. For a long, long time, it was a major go-to. Then, boom, 2009. Tapentadol shows up. And this was a big deal. It was the first new opioid molecule in years. But then something interesting happened. Look at 2014. The DEA suddenly tightened the leash on Tramadol. That move kind of hinted that maybe this super common drug had some risks hiding under the surface. And that really sets the stage for our whole comparison. Okay, to really, really get the difference here, we have to pop the hood and see how these things actually work to stop pain. It's time to head down to what I like to call the engine room, their mechanism of action. So right off the bat, you can totally see why people get them confused. I mean, look at this. Both of them attack pain in two identical ways. First, they're both mu-opioid receptor agonists. That's the classic opioid playbook, right? It hits the main off switch for pain signals in your brain. And second, they both block the reuptake of norepinephrine, which is another way your body helps turn down the volume on pain. Based on this alone, you'd swear they were twins. But here's our first major plot twist. Tramadol has a third trick up its sleeve. It's also a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Tapentadol, on the other hand, it doesn't really touch serotonin at all. Now, this is not just some tiny detail. Serotonin is a massively powerful neurotransmitter, and when you start messing with it, well, that has some really serious consequences, which we're going to see in just a minute. Okay, let's circle back to that first thing they have in common, the opioid part. Are they equally strong there? Oh, not even close. This chart just lays it out perfectly. Tapentadol binds to that opioid receptor about 18 times weaker than morphine does, which, sounds pretty weak until you look over at Tramadol. It's a mind-boggling 6,000 times weaker. So yeah, they both hit that receptor, but the difference in their punch is just enormous. So we've got different engines, but how does your body actually handle them once you take them? This brings us to the metabolism maze, the body's assembly line. And this is where the differences get even more stark. Think of it like comparing a straight, direct superhighway to a tangled, unpredictable mess of city streets. Tapentadol? Well, it takes the superhighway. It is a clean, simple, one-step process. It gets to the liver, which converts it directly into compounds that do nothing. They're inactive. Then they just get flushed right out. And that word, inactive, is so important. It means the body doesn't turn it into any other active chemicals along the way. That keeps things predictable and the risk of surprise drug interactions way, way down. And then there's Tramadol. Tramadol is that messy city grid. It needs a complicated multi-step process using two key enzymes. You'll see them called CYP2D6 and CYP3A4. Now, here's the crazy part. That first enzyme, CYP2D6, turns Tramadol into a totally new chemical, a metabolite called M1. And get this, M1 is actually a more powerful painkiller than the Tramadol you took in the first place. So what that means is the drug's actual effect, how well it works for you, depends entirely on your own personal body chemistry. And this right here is where taking Tramadol becomes a total genetic lottery. Some people, we call them poor metabolizers, just don't make enough of that powerful M1 stuff, so they barely get any pain relief. But then you have ultra-rapid metabolizers who make way too much, way too fast, and that can lead to some serious side effects. And this isn't some rare thing. It's estimated that about 15% of Caucasians have genetic quirks that mess with this pathway, making Tramadol a real gamble for a huge chunk of the population. Okay, so different mechanisms, different metabolism, so what, right? What does that actually mean for patients? Well, it all leads to this, very, very different real-world risks. Let's connect all those dots we just laid out and take a hard look at the safety profile. Hey, remember that third mechanism, the one that was unique to Tramadol, serotonin? This is where it goes from being a difference to a major liability. because it puts patients at risk for a really dangerous condition called serotonin syndrome. This is what happens when your body gets a toxic overload of serotonin. It can cause everything from tremors and a high fever to confusion and even life-threatening seizures. It's serious stuff. So just how different is their effect on serotonin? This one number tells you everything you need to know. Tramadol is nearly 5 times more powerful at blocking serotonin reuptake than Tapentadol is. That is a massive, massive difference in activity. And let's translate that potency into what's actually happening inside your brain. At a normal pain-relieving dose, Tramadol can make your serotonin levels spike 5 to 6 times higher than normal. Tapentadol, with its barely there effect, it only raises them about 2 times. This directly explains why the risk of serotonin syndrome is so much higher with Tramadol, especially if you're taking it with other common meds like antidepressants. So when you just lay it all out, side by side, the difference in their safety is it's stark. It's really black and white. Across the board, from the risk of seizures and serotonin syndrome, down to even common side effects like vomiting, Tramadol just carries a much higher risk. And because of that complicated metabolism, it's a potential minefield for drug interactions, a risk that is so much lower with Tapentadol. All right, we've looked at the engines, we've walked through the assembly lines, and we've seen the real-world risks. I think it's time we circle all the way back to that first question and deliver the final verdict. I don't think I can say it any better than the authors from one of our main sources, Practical Pain Management. This quote just says it all loud and clear. Without a doubt, Tapentadol is far from a glorified Tramadol. I mean, that's about as direct as it gets, and it's based on all the hard evidence. So, if you're going to remember just 3 things from all of this, let it be these. First, the mechanism. Tramadol messes with your serotonin, Tapentadol doesn't. Second, the metabolism. Tapentadol is simple and predictable, while Tramadol is a complex genetic lottery. And third, the risk profile. All of that adds up to Tramadol carrying a higher risk of some very serious side effects. So let's go back to that original question. Is Tapentadol just a glorified Tramadol? I think the evidence makes it clear absolutely not. Not even close. They might get prescribed for similar types of pain, but behind the scenes, their stories could not be more different. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other common medications out there are we oversimplifying, hiding this much complexity just beneath the surface?